Today on the show, our leaders review and interrogate the vicious cycle of inequality in our country, and we get to find out which two contestants will be heading to the finale. Sanibonani Babugeli, and welcome to One Day Leader Season 8, Konalago SABC 1. Igama lami nguPearl Shongwe. We are only 1 week away from the finale, and today is an all-important episode. Do stay with us throughout the show to see who makes it in the end to next week's final. COVID-19 has taken all the iniquities and broken systems of this country and exposed them to the rest of us. This leads me to tonight's debate question: what action must be taken and by whom to reduce the gap of inequality in our society? As usual, you at home can join the conversation by visiting our social media pages on Twitter and Instagram. Simply search for @OneDayLeader and find us at One Day Leader Season 8 on Facebook. Leaders, I trust you're ready to tackle today's debate question. So I'll start with you, Tobani, with your vision statement.
Compatriots, for a very long time we have cried foul play and injustices and having been failed by the older generation as this generation. Yet, having cried so much, we have done so very little. And it seems that this cycle is going to continue and continue. We have said that stop abusing our sisters and our mothers because it's a vile and dangerous thing. Are we going to continue crying, or are we going to start doing something about it? It is a high time that we start acting and putting our words into action, or we are going to have a very deadly scenario coming in the future generations. Compatriots, I ask you to join me in changing South Africa for a very better nation. May Africa. May God bless Africa and her people.
Thank you very much to you, Tobani. Zizipo, it is your turn. Good evening.
I am on a mission to establish contact beyond the grave with the heroes of our past, to assure them that their struggle was not in vain, but most importantly, to remind you and I that our voices did not get drowned from the echoes of our forefathers at the bullet of the colonialists. Africa is not poor. Africa is being robbed by our silence, apathy, and neutrality. For socio-economic transformation and emancipation, South Africa needs a new type of citizen, a catalyst for change, a surgeon for humanity, and an advocate for Africanism. If not you and I, then who? And if not now, then when?
Thank you very much, Zizi. Good evening to you, Vusi. Your vision statement, please.
The creation of a peaceful and prosperous society that includes all people of all races, regardless of gender and transcending sexual orientation, is pursuing a compelling cause to achieve a system greater than ourselves, restoring peace and promoting the cause of prosperity for all. South Africa, I am the one you've been waiting for.
Thank you very much, Vusi. And finally, Bal, good evening to you. Your vision statement, please.
My voice, my mind, my life. 3 things I will use to fight for those whose suffering has been silenced. Youth hindered by a lackluster education system. Women under siege by the patriarchy, from the gender pay gap to gender-based violence. Queer bodies systemically excluded from all sectors of society. The 99% who've been repeatedly failed by the state. And Black Africans who continue to live under the dictatorship that is the legacy of apartheid. South Africa, I give you my voice, my mind, my life.
Thank you very much, leaders, for your vision statements. Now, Babugeli, usually we'd be looking at the scoreboard, but tonight there'll be no need because we have reset the points system. Yep, you've heard correctly. All leaders have 0 points to their names. Leaders, today, I know you'll be giving it your all. I know you'll be showing us your ultimate debating skills and leaving everything behind those podiums. So all the best from me. Now, to ensure fairness, we've also invited an auditor from PricewaterhouseCoopers who will be helping us audit the results. Now, over to our guest judge. She is a director at the Studies in Poverty and Inequality Institute, a non-profit organization with an aim to alleviate the scourge of inequality and poverty in South Africa. Please help me welcome Isabel Frey.
Good evening. Thank you, Pearl.
It's awesome to have you on the show. Why would you say South Africa is one of the most unequal societies in the world?
South Africa is indeed one of the most unequal countries in the world. And that's both in terms of income inequality, what people earn, and wealth inequality, what people have accumulated and have access to. Predominantly, the main driver of inequality is apartheid and colonialism. Both systems in terms of which the majority of South Africans were robbed of their assets that had been theirs, and whites were privileged at the cost of the majority of South Africans. If we look more recently, since 1994, we all know that the right to equality is one of the main constitutional rights, but we haven't seen this playing out in terms of the social and the economic strata. So, for instance, if you look at inequality, what we've seen is that inequality between race groups has lessened, and yet inequality within race groups has grown, which is an interesting phenomenon, but it doesn't serve to bring unity amongst South Africans.
All right, thank you very much for those insights. Now allow me to welcome our resident judges. Gugulethu Gugs Mhlungu has over 10 years experience in media and was the winner of the 2015 Columnist of the Year at the Legends Media Awards, as well as Ndumiso Hadebe, who was the winner of One Day Leader Season 2. He's an economist by profession and an entrepreneur. Ndumiso, let me briefly come to you. What is the economic impact of these great inequalities that we see in our society, specifically when we look at the majority of people who live in absolute abject poverty?
The economic impact has a number of layers to it. On the one side, you have an instance where you have a very small number of people who are contributing towards revenue that can be generated by the South African Revenue Service, which is quite important for the resources that the state can deploy towards very important social programs, schooling, clinics, roads, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much, judges, for your great insights as usual. In addition to the fears of the virus, inequality is a foremost challenge our country is facing due to the disparities between rich and poor. Masboye Dolo, we do explore this further. Namugele khona la ku One Day Leader on SABC 1 Mzansi for sure. Igama nginguPearl Shongwe. Taking a look at tonight's debate topic, what action must be taken and by whom to reduce the gap of inequality in our society? Babugeli ngakhohle ukuthi owena umbono ubaluleke kakhulu kuthina. Ngakho ke sibhaleleni on our social media platforms. Satholakala ku Twitter na ku Instagram at One Day Leader, and our Facebook page is One Day Leader Season 8. Now, with COVID-19, some of the most basic guidelines have been for communities to wash their hands and practice social distancing. This is said with perhaps the assumption that all residents could adhere to these. But how practical are they when you live in an environment that is not built for such? Let me share some of the realities with you. Let's take a look at this insert.
At this time, more than any other, we are reminded of the words of the father of our nation, Madiba, when he said, "It is now in your hands."
A South African community, densely populated, with few, if any, resources available to its residents. It is in these low-income areas where South Africans are bearing the brunt of the coronavirus fallout. They were already struggling before due to poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Informal settlements found in the big cities exhibit a clear line between wealth and extreme poverty. The residents, if not employed, had service industry jobs or were workers in the informal sector. When the lockdown brought a reduction to economic activities, they were the most disproportionately affected, losing their income immediately with no replacement solution. Our government adopted a rescue plan to save jobs and businesses, but most informal, micro, and small enterprises are not aligned with public policy and structures. Their households have little cash, low or zero savings, and are less able to weather negative shocks when they come along. Now, many are facing the threat of evictions and homelessness. Another big concern about the effects of the virus is the public health threat. Most infectious diseases tend to travel the routes of inequality in any society. Informal settlements are generally considered to provide very unhealthy living environments. One cannot practice a heightened level of hygiene where the only access to water is a communal standpipe and shared ablution facilities. As the number of infections increase on a daily basis, it is evident that our society's most vulnerable are the hardest hit by the virus.
Ngempela babukeli kuyadabukisa ngempela ukubona konke lokho. Kodwa let me once again turn to our judges and Googs. This time I'll come to you. What are some of the stumbling blocks that are preventing South Africa from moving forward and eradicating inequality?
I think South Africa, like the rest of the world, for a long time, the measure of development was macroeconomics. I'm going to borrow from Ndumiso's area of specialization. We focused on the reduction of extreme poverty, which was quite an important measure, but then we didn't focus on, outside of just reducing people living on, less than $1 a day, or whatever the particular metric for extreme poverty was. What else defines a decent and dignified life? So it's not enough to just put people in houses or housing settlements, but what is the state of those settlements? Where are they? But I'm keen to hear some of the solutions our leaders come up with.
Yeah, and I certainly hope our leaders will touch on and get into those finer details that I know you're always looking for. Judges, thank you very much once again. Now, coming up after the break, our leaders get to tackle this issue. We're very excited to hear what comes out of tonight's debates. Mzansi, continue interacting with us on our social media platforms and let us know your thoughts. We'll be right back.
As the NYDA, we're very excited with the change that comes with the new government. The presidency in particular is very much focused on young people, and the NYDA plays a central role in implementing the vision of government as it relates to its youth. We're going to introduce new and innovative funds, and we're going to partner with other entities like the Department of Small Business to bring comprehensive packages of support to young people who want to be and are passionate entrepreneurs. We'll be upgrading many of our service centers, and we'll be working with entities like the Department of Employment and Labor and our social partners, Harambee and the Youth Employment Service.
That message was brought to you by the NYDA. The NYDA is dedicated in truly nurturing and uplifting the lives of youth in South Africa. 18 million people in South African households rely on social grants as a main source of income, which is hardly enough to see them through until the next income date. What action must be taken and by whom to reduce the gap of inequality in our society? Our leaders will certainly tackle this issue in a short while, but first let's find out who will debate who. And before we get to that, Belle, we recognize that you have been leading in terms of the points throughout most parts of the season. So we're going to allow you to come forward and choose a name of one of these other three contestants that you'll be going up against tonight. So I'd like you to please come forward. Babugeli nikhumbuleke ukuthi tonight we wiped the scoreboard clean. Lokho kusho ukuthi all our contestants are currently sitting on 0 points each. Belle, go ahead. Put your faith in a piece of paper. Will you let us know who you're debating, please?
Leader 5.
Leader 5. You can go back to the podium. Thank you very much. Indeed, only one of these contestants between Leader 5 and 6 will make it through to next week's finale. For now, Babugeli, let's take a look at the rules of debate. You have 60 seconds to propose, 90 seconds to debate, and 30 seconds to conclude. All right, leaders, I trust that you are ready to tackle tonight's debate question. You already know what we're asking. I trust that you've prepared. We are fighting it out tonight to get one of you into the final spot next week. So, Leader 6, your time starts now.
To combat inequality in South Africa, we need a multifaceted and multi-actor approach which targets as many sectors and as many actors as possible. I've broadly categorized these into reforms and developmental measures. Starting with reforms, legal reforms, i.e. tax law, introducing a progressive tax system catering to black tax and introducing a wealth tax. Labor law, tailoring policies around SMMEs and taking proactive measures to protect marginalized people, addressing land redistribution and the introduction of a small claims commercial court. 2. Educational reforms, i.e. creating a ladder of opportunity for upward mobility for children, graduates and adults, reforming the curriculum, making STEM and business-aligned subjects accessible, and improving support for institutions of higher learning, both in terms of resources and in terms of general attention from a government level. 3. A grant system in social welfare, i.e. a basic income grant alongside proactive job creation policies and improving access to housing and other basic services. And finally, breathing life into Chapter 9 institutions to create better accountability from the government. Then on to developmental measures. Firstly, state and trade union-driven economic measures, increasing minimum wage.
Time's up. Thank you very much, Leader 6. You have 90 seconds to engage on the question.
Increasing minimum wage, establishing manufacturing within South Africa, financing startups, and making SMME funding accessible, not yet, like the US, India, and China, not yet. 2. Local government-led development projects, i.e. going beyond building roads, bridges and commercializing farming, not yet, to building schools, clinics and community centres, specifically in neglected communities as a form of fiscal stimulus, right? This directly leads to job creation and microeconomic growth. Thirdly, then, changing the current state welfare programs, which seek to develop human capital, privatizing state-owned enterprises with a developmental mindset, and facilitating private sector-led development through CSR programs. Not yet.
Leaders, you have to engage. Remember the rules.
But those are macroeconomic
incentivizing skills development with tax rebates and the creation of microfinance organizations like Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. Now you may offer a point of information.
I wanted to say that those are macroeconomic policies. And what about policies on the ground at the community level? What about socially perceived necessities for South Africans?
Right. This takes me to one of my very important reforms specifically, which is this idea of community-led development, right? And why this is such a valuable economic reform. This is specifically happening at a local government level. So in this instance, it's going beyond, as I said, roads, bridges and dams, but clinics and education facilities. Local government essentially gets funding from the national level and makes it accessible to community leaders to facilitate a process of growth and development at a community level, which allows community leaders and individuals from that community.
Time's up. Thank you very much, Leader 6. You can wrap it up with your conclusion.
The impacts of this policy are immense. People have capital and therefore power at their disposal to meet basic needs and improve their standard of living via the redistribution of both wealth and land. SMEs are afforded greater protection and support, empowering people of all ages via different mechanisms through education and fostering a culture of entrepreneurship. The state actually gets held accountable for corruption and service delivery. The state fosters economic growth both at a micro and at a macro level. Welfare programs restore human dignity, and the private sector takes an active role in development and combats inequality.
Thank you very much, Leader 6. Your time is up. Leader 5, the tables are turned. Your 60 seconds start now.
South Africa is the world's most unequal society. The divide reflects the country's legacy of racial exclusion, where blacks still can't access proper education, health and infrastructure. According to Stats SA, education and the labour market status, which have become racialized and gender biased, are the primary drivers of inequality, 74.2%. This followed by spatial injustice, which subjects people to life of poverty, where they can't access economic productivity and economic activity and productivity. We must reform the education and health sectors. We must foster spatial integration, broaden social security, focusing on education and training to redress imbalances in education and health, re-examine work remuneration and the structure of the labour market so that we can tackle income inequality. At community level, we must upskill development programs focusing on the forgotten youth, the child-headed households, as well as those who leave the education system prior to reaching matric, similar to the Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee. We must remain cognizant of the poorest and most vulnerable group in society, black women, who are fighting economic, gender and racial inequality by centralizing the role of the Commission for Gender Equality so that our policies are developed through a racial and gender perspective as well.
Thank you very much, leaders. You now may engage.
There is a gulf between where many people live and where resources and opportunities are concentrated. This aggravates poverty and unemployment for those in the periphery. With spatial integration to break physical separation between productive activity and the peoples of paramount importance, through the Spatial Management Land Act, we can make sure that in the short term, there's utilities and provision of land.
But you can't just give people land and no capital to develop that land. You also can't just give people land and not equip them with the skills they need to make use of that. But no, Vusi, all you've given us is rhetoric.
I'm saying through the Special Land Act, in the short term, we can make sure that areas in the peripheries are developed so that they can be prosperity and social cohesion.
Under my
and in the long term,
and in the long term,
make sure that land is addressed properly. When it comes to education reform, the curriculum must be developed by the human cluster of cabinet instead of the Department of Basic Education alone, focusing on three things: investment on teachers, inclusiveness and accountability. The schools of specialization that are in Gauteng and the Western Capes must be rolled out to all the 7 provinces of the country.
You need to engage on the comparative here. Why is your model significantly better in terms of addressing inequality? You haven't done that
mine speaks at the community level. We must focus on the child-generated households.
I have an entire extension around community-led development programs.
The 47.5% who fall out of the schooling system, by making sure that they are enrolled at the NYDA program called Youth Build, so that they can get alternative education, skills development and entrepreneurship. When we talk about inequality, we must pay specific attention to the state of black women. The Commission for Gender Equality must foster the interests of black women in rural areas.
Time's up. Thank you very much. You may conclude your debate, Leader 5.
In a world where knowledge is rewarded as much as it is today, education is the greatest equalizer. With decent income to sustain, people can sustain a decent standard of living to be able to perform at the rate that the economy of the country needs them to be and longer. This can be achieved through comprehensive health, improved education and spatial integration. Black women are the poorest and most vulnerable. We must champion their interests. Their forgotten youth exacerbate levels of inequality at the community level. We cannot leave them behind. That's what makes these solutions comprehensive and practical.
Thank you very much. You gave away a couple of your seconds there, Leader 5, but that wraps up our first debate of the evening. Ndumiso, I'm going to come to you, not for the verdict, however, just for your comments on that first debate.
So I think on the one side, Belle, you did very well in structuring your debate. I could follow very well in terms of what your particular proposal meant from a reforms perspective, but also from a developmental perspective, and you articulated quite well. I don't know how you keep managing filling in so many important items in such short space of time, but you've done exceptionally well, and you've identified very key elements. Vusi, you also articulated to quite, I would have, I guess, maybe I might have missed it, but you emphasize quite a lot on the gender biases and how the kind of legislation that you're proposing should also focus on the biases or the discrepancies that occur between men and women, particularly from a labor perspective, education perspective, and an income earning perspective as well. So the themes that you guys have touched upon were quite key. I'm not going to dwell on the engagement because it is a semi-final.
Thank you very much, Googs. Let me come to you briefly. Your thoughts?
I thought a great start to the evening, and I'm glad that some of the, because when we speak about inequality, we then get into details of the lived experience, the kind of the cold face, the nuances of inequality. So black women, spatial development, land reform as being one of the issues that we must tackle. The issue of education, as we know, for instance, that even though it is not perfect, those who are able to finish school and access higher education have a lower unemployment rate than those who are the majority who don't have the privilege of finishing school. So I'm glad that some of those issues around gender, around land, around education came up, but also the issue of not just numbers, so focusing on how many people are employed, but making it decent, dignified living wages, which has been one of the big concerns for poor South Africans in the post-apartheid dispensation.
Thank you very much. And I'll come to you, Isabel. Just your thoughts on what our leaders spoke about in that first debate.
Thanks, Phil. Yes, you did certainly manage to get a fair number of issues in a small period of time. I'm not sure whether in Parliament they managed to use as many concepts in any given discussion or debate. I think the questions that you raised were very good. I think the following of legislation as well as other policy macroeconomic as well as microeconomic interstices were really useful. And I really liked contestant number 5, the ideas that you had around community development. I thought what was lacking, given the fact that we're looking at 3 decades of post-apartheid inequalities, were real innovations. Now, this is lacking internationally, so don't take this too hard, but it would really be good as the rest of the evening unfolds if we could see some innovative solutions.
All right, thank you very much, judges. Mabogel Nikhumbula ukuthi we're not going to get the verdict from our judges right now. Instead, we'll tell you right at the end when we find out who of our 4 leaders will be making it through to next week's finale. Must be $8 we get to our next debate. Ninganyas. Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us. Konalagu One Day Leader Season 8. We're 1 week away from the final, Babugeli. This is an all-important episode. Our debate question that our leaders seek to answer tonight is, what action must be taken and by whom to reduce the gap of inequality in our society? Well, it's pretty obvious who our next debaters will be, and this time I'll start with you, Tabani. You've got 60 seconds to produce your argument.
In the fight against poverty, inequality emerges as the primary issue. So said Jim Yong Kim in 2016, who was the president of the World Bank. So I'm going to propose a few solutions. One, the first one that we need to address is the land question. We need to address the land question urgently, and with efficiency. We need to look at the radical socio-economic transformation. We need to build an effective tax structure which is going to deal with tax redistribution to assess the public sector. We need to invest on a quality, unified, free education, especially investing from the early stages of education of young kids. We need to also look into the pay equity gap that is there from race to gender. We need to improve the retirement social security for all the people that look into retirement. We need to better the social programs from grants and community development. We need to better the participation of the poor in the policy making and decisions, because they need to voice out their views in order for us to address their inequalities. Revise the legislative framework that fosters inequality, and also the Chapter 9 of the Constitution.
Thank you very much. Engage leaders.
We need to also look into the final structures which are going to incentivize and find the informal economy, because that's where the most of the people that are at the back foot are.
Before you carry on, I'd just like to pose a question regarding your land reform strategy. To whom will it be distributed, for what use, and based on what economic landscape?
Okay, thank you very much. The question is, how then do we look into the land redistribution? We already know that people already do have land, and in some institutions or in some places like your Eastern Cape and in your Limpopo, people, they do have land and they're already practicing farming, but the problem is they are not allowed the opportunity to access the economy and practices further into the economy. So we need to not only just look into saying that we are going to give people land and give people land in the Eastern Cape or in Limpopo, because even those two provinces are provinces that are not participating at the large scale of the economy. Look into giving people land within the Western Cape where they are able to farm and they're able to grow and harvest into the economy. Give them land in the place.
The land question is about citizenship, it is about production, it is about livelihoods, it is about identity. And you're not giving me a landscape that is focused on the distribution, the utilization of the land and ownership.
Okay.
What are you taking from where, giving to who, for what purposes?
The land, the question which is then based on, it is whom are we taking the land? Majority of the land in South Africa, it is owned by the elite and the white minority group, and it does not represent.
Thank you very much, Leader 2. You can conclude your debate, please.
Okay, when we look at radical socio-economic transformation, let me just rebrowse there. We need to be able to look at the concentration of the economy. The economy is concentrated to an elite few, as is the land. So the IMF recently recommended that we need to unlock how the economy of South Africa is, so that more people are able to participate and actually look into the economy. We need to change how we run the economy, the structure and the state of the economy, and we need to also look into the management and the control of this economy.
Thank you very much, Leader 2. The tables are turned. Your time is up, Leader 3.
There is an interdependency between the inequality of outcomes and that of opportunities. Without equal opportunities, systematic patterns of discrimination and exclusion prevent the poor and the disadvantaged groups from accessing economic, political, and social resources, resulting in traps of inequality and the persistence of inequality throughout generations. And that is why the solution is to simply close the gaps in priority sectors. So in sectors such as education, health and nutrition, water and sanitation, we need to close the gaps through optimization, level composition, and the targeting of public expenditure, improvement of service delivery modalities, the adoption of governance reforms for the improvement and the strengthening of institutional capacity, and this is very critical. We also need to improve the access to and the reliability of infrastructure services, to enhance community involvement, regional cooperation, and inter-regional trade. Furthermore, technological advancement has taken center stage and competition is becoming knowledge-based. Therefore, we need to capitalize on ICT and accelerate its introduction in priority sectors.
Thank you very much, Leader 3. You can engage.
All right. So, what we need to understand, first of all, is that inequality is structural. It is about the design of... Yes.
Okay, your last point, which was ICT, we need to accelerate the involvement of ICT. We already have a vast majority of more than 60% of people whom have been deprived the basic education towards ICT. How then do you accelerate that, and whilst also involving people? We have people who are over 30 who are stagnant in even learning how to utilize WhatsApp. So how are we going to involve them?
So before even that, we adopt a technical-based education system that will equip the current and future generations so that when we introduce ICT, they're equipped. As I was saying, you need to understand that the inequality structure, it is about the design of the social system, and you're questioning a single element and the operation and how these elements operate in the interaction that reinforces the outcome. What I'm providing here is a systematic approach that simply proposes a comprehensive policy framework that addresses inequality systematically according to the dimensions of well-being. How? By bridging the gap in priority sectors, instituting effective, transparent regulatory framework, promoting democracy and the involvement and participation of the people in the structuring and running of their livelihoods.
Okay.
Yes.
Your points, they seem so good because we can practice them in Western Cape and in Gauteng or in Free State. How then do you take all of these to the majority of the people who are stagnant within the rural segments of South Africa that lack the production of whatever you speak of?
My system is...
Time's up. Thank you very much, Leaders. Leader 3, you can conclude your debate.
As I have emphasized before, we need to amend the Constitution and codify all policy framework and strategies according to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Solutions that are not people-centered, and any systematic approach that does not address the economic legacy of colonialism is an amplifier of inequality in social, political, and economic spheres.
All right, giving away a couple of your seconds there, Leader 3, but that's okay. Now that concludes our debates for tonight. Let's quickly go to our guest judge to get insights on what she thought from our second debate. Sabal?
Thank you. I saw there the introduction of technology, and I thought that was a really interesting juxtaposition to land. I think that it's neither either or, it needs to build on. In terms of Tabani's point on rapid economic transformation, I thought that was really interesting, and the fact that we needed to free up the majority of people to participate. I would have liked a few more concrete ways in which that would have been done. Yes, looking at the rural provinces was interesting, and the lack of access to markets was definitely something which stands to impede. I would have liked possibly to have dwelt on, for instance, cross-border migration. I know that the two of you talked about citizenship when you were debating, and the question of how we disallow people from other countries to prosper in our country, and how that might actually lead to a stagnation of the learning of ideas and innovation.
All right, thank you very much. Googs, your thoughts?
I thought quite an interesting debate. I would have liked to hear a bit more again on, Thandi, this person that we've identified in our National Development Plan, young, poor, women who are kind of the face of the majority, and how we go about, because again, when we speak about solutions, we need to be quite targeted, we need to be quite specific, especially at this stage in the competition. I did think Zizipo's question to Tabani about land, what kind of land, for what purpose, to whom, was quite an important one, particularly in the urban space, because as we understand that for the most part, land is more than just a thing to live off. It is also about public resources, schools, hospitals, roads, things that would facilitate people accessing their first generation rights. I thought that was a very important question. But otherwise, I thought also quite an exciting debate that touched on a lot of issues, again, for a country as complex as ours, that we need to be thinking about when we look at some of these issues.
All right, Googs, thank you very much. Ndumiso, very briefly, your thoughts and reflections.
Sure. In both debates, I was hoping to hear something about broad-based black economic empowerment, as it's quite a contentious issue addressing inequalities in South Africa. A lot have been said about it not working, about it working, and I would have anticipated it to be a touching point at some other point. Again, on the question of employment equity and all of those things, I would have loved to hear what your thoughts were and what innovations you had about existing legislation. I mean, even from a Public Finance Management Act. But overall, let's see, comrades.
On that note, we indeed shall see. Now, after the break, we get some parting shots from our judges and find out from our auditors from PwC, which leaders will be joining us next week as we crown the ultimate Season 8 one-day leader winner. Ungaindawo, lots of excitement still to come. Welcome back to the final stanza of One Day Leader Season 8. We are in the semi-final heading into next week's final. Thank you so much for staying with us up to so far. Now, before the break, our contestants debated, and during the ad break, it was very tense as our auditors and together with our judges had to deliberate on the scores and give us the final results as to who will be going into next week's final. I'm going to get final thoughts from our judges this week and perhaps a bit of advice for our contestants going into next week's final. Ndumiso?
Sure. I think today's debate, I think the whole season as a whole, we've had some of the finest debaters that I certainly have not seen over the past 8 seasons, as it were. And so congratulations to all of you in that sense. The parting shot would be, as you go out in the world, whether you proceed to the final or not, please, let's try to engage more with because I think it was an observation from today's debate. Let's engage more with existing statutes that inform the kind of status quo that we presently have. And from that, derive the solutions that are required, because there's a certain element that tends to miss to say, yes, we become innovative, but from what base? What kind of critical analysis have we conducted of the current status quo? Because I think as you go out into the real world, whether you go out to be politicians or business leaders or bureaucrats, that's the kind of critical skill set that will be required from each and every one of you to deploy. And again, I wish you all of the best. I've seen some of the finest leaders in the season, so congratulations.
Thank you, Ndumiso. Googs?
Sure. I think the most important thing is what happens on the show, as affirming as it can be. I think especially to get to the stage, I think for all 4 leaders, regardless of where it ends up at the end of this evening, I think what's quite important is to not take what happens on the show as a kind of a summation or a final judgment on your capacity, your ability for leadership. I think the show is one measure, but regardless of what happens here, what happens next week when we crown the winner of Season 8, I think it's quite important to keep in mind that this is just one metric. It was one show. And I hope, regardless of what happens, that you continue to do your work. You continue to, keep doing the kind of work, the kind of engagement that got you to this point. Obviously, use this platform. Leverage it as much as you can, but continue to do the thing that got you here in the first place, that had you be the top 6 out of hundreds of other pretty strong candidates, but you rose to the top out of, I think, a very strong cohort this year.
That's been quite a long journey indeed for our contestants. Isobel, just final thoughts from you tonight.
Sure. Well, it's been incredibly exhilarating being part of this. So thank you very much for the invitation. For me, what this evening confirmed is that the youth are not disengaged. Many people are concerned at this apparent disengagement of the youth with real issues. You seem to really carry the main issues of this country close to your heart. I think as you go forward, for me, understanding power and where power lies. So power and privilege, but also power and agency to transform people's lives. And I think that that's a crucial element of dismantling inequality. I also just wanted to say that the question of COVID and how that goes forward, as we've unpacked tonight, really will be determined by the underlying structural faults, and we want to ensure that going forward those are tackled. So good luck, and it really has been a privilege to be with you tonight.
Thank you very much to all of you judges tonight and contestants. All the best to you as we find out who'll be making it through to next week's final. We've got an auditor from PricewaterhouseCoopers, as I've been mentioning throughout the show. Her name is Thandiwe, and I'll just invite her to come onto the set. She'll be giving us the results, and we'll find out soon enough who will make it through to next week's final. Thandiwe, it's great to have you. Are you sure? Have you made doubly sure that our judges got all the numbers right this evening?
Yes, we have.
All right. Are you confident? I'm sure you watched the show tonight. Are you confident that they've made the right choice?
Yes, I'm very confident.
All right. Thank you very much. Any changes? Last minute changes?
No, nothing. We're confident with our choice.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am sure. All right. There you go.
Ooh. Yes, it was indeed a very tough debate, and I can tell you this, the judges had a very tough time deciding on who the two contestants will be to make it into next week's finale. Not an easy decision. You at home have done your bit to support our contestants up to so far, and we'd like to thank you for your continuous support. No last minute changes, judges. This is where the journey for two of you will end tonight. From the first debate, Mzansi, the winner is... I need you to look at this again.
I think it's accurate.
This is accurate.
It's very accurate.
Congratulations, we'll see you going into next week's final. Well, it's time for us to bid you farewell. Thank you so much for coming onto the show and for your awesome contribution. Let's take a look at your journey with us this season.
So coming into One Day Leader, I was faced with a pretty big decision. Do I take part in the show? Do I follow something that I think is an incredibly important platform and use this platform to advocate for issues that I really care about? So education, women's issues, issues that affect the queer community, the economically disenfranchised, and obviously Black, Indigenous and people of colour in South Africa. Or do I continue my studies as I'd thought a week prior to the filming of that first episode that I was going to do? And I thought, this is quite literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is not something that I can pass up. So to my mom and my dad, thank you so much for always supporting me throughout this entire journey. And I know that it was incredibly hard for you to not have me just around the corner or at home. Thank you for being so understanding that I needed to not study this year and effectively take a gap year, which is something that you were both rather anti. So just thank you to everyone who's been so incredibly supportive. Everyone in the UCT Debating Union, everyone at the Western Cape Schools Debating Board, not just the board members, but all of the kids. I wish I could name all of you, but there's just too many to get through. You guys have completely changed my life, and please don't be disheartened. I know this is incredibly difficult. I'm very disappointed, but this is not the end, not by a long shot. And what I've learned here is going to be applied in everything else that I do for the rest of my life.
Thank you for taking the time out of your life to grace us with your presence, your brains, your passion for this country. We wish you all the best, Belle. And now our second contestant that will be making it into next week's final. Nothing else will change now. The scores are in, they've been counted, and the decision has been made. So with that, congratulations to you, Zizipho. You're going through to next week's final. Tobani, I cannot tell you how much love we all have for you. Let's take a look at your journey.
I feel defeated, and it's in twofold. One side of me is defeated, but one side of me is actually giving rebirth to a new me, a better me, you know. Not finishing a race, when you just put everything on pause and you go for that one thing that you want to get the most, and you do your best to try and get it the most. There's nothing as a sucker punch that you have to end somewhere halfway through the line and not get to the finish line. So right now, I actually did not lose right now. I actually just ran out of time. That's all it is. I ran out of time, and I'm gonna need to make sure that the next time I come hard and not run out of time in whatever situation I face in my life. This is not just about a show that shoots for a few weeks on TV and then it goes out, lights out, but it's more about touching people's lives for the rest of your life, carrying the champion's brand.
This land I live in, it is not given unto me by my forefathers, but it is the land that I was given by my children, so that one day I may return it to them as an African land with an African identity. South Africa, Africans, join me in building an Africa with an African-centered nation and an African-centered identity. Mayihlome Africa.
And to you, Tomani, I think you know how far you've come. We celebrate you. We thank you for your time, putting everything on hold just for us. It's been an honor having you on One Day Leader. And of course, Mzansi, join me in congratulating our two contestants, Vusi and Zizipho, who have both made it into next week's finale. We will be on your screens next Thursday at 9 p.m. right here on SABC1, where we crown the ultimate one-day leader. For now, I'll leave you with this quote from struggle hero and one of the fiercest opponents of injustice and inequality, the late Chris Hani. We need to create the pathways to give hope to our youth, that they can have the opportunity through education and hard work to escape the trap of poverty. Angibambe lapho okwanamhlanje asiphinde futhi sihlangane futhi ngeviki elandelayo. From myself, Pearl Shongwe, Umdimanzi, Bambolonyu, Mageza Ngelbisi, Emandiahleti, and the rest of our One Day Leader team, it's good night.